Hey everybody, it's Tony Zayas back with another episode of the SaaS Founders Show, where we have fascinating conversations with SaaS founders who share all about their experience, the growth, the process, the challenges, and how they overcame them. And so today I am joined by Monica Eaton-Cardone. She's the owner and co-founder and CEO of Chargebacks911. They're the first global company dedicated to preventing chargeback fraud, eliminating cyber shoplifting, and safeguarding the e-commerce experience for merchants, e-stores, and consumers. So, Monica, thank you so much for joining us here today. I will flip. So, you're the one that is being spotlighted here today, but thank you for joining. Really appreciate it. And I read the little descriptor, but tell us more about Chargebacks 911.
Sure. Well, first of all, great to be here. Thank you for having me, Tony.
Absolutely.
So Chargebacks 911, it probably says it in our name. We do something with chargebacks. So we are a dispute and chargeback processing platform, and we provide SaaS solutions to financial institutions. So these are banks, whether they issue credit cards or they process, merchant accounts for credit card processing for merchants and retailers. We also support merchants and retailers. So essentially, we have a platform solution that provides technology that helps automate processes for disputes. And a dispute is really a disagreement between a buyer and a seller. And it's very common with credit cards and debit cards. And it's extremely common with the growth of e-commerce. And we operate all over the world.
Yeah, so before we dive in and kind of unpack a lot of that, I would love to hear, or if you can explain for everyone, so everyone is clear on what a chargeback is. I have experience with it because.
Sure. So a chargeback is what happens when, as a buyer, so as a consumer, let's say I bought something from Amazon, and now I didn't receive my product. Well, I call Amazon. They tell me that they shipped it, but absolutely I did not receive it. Then I have the right, because I use my credit card, and this is a protection mechanism for every single card. So I can call my bank. So maybe my credit card is with Capital One. So I call Capital One and I tell Capital One, look, I haven't received this product. It's not fair. I tried to get my money back and I haven't gotten it. And then Capital One forces a refund on Amazon and files something called a chargeback. And Amazon now has the opportunity to either accept liability. So they could say, actually, we made a mistake. Monica's right. She should have gotten her money back. Or they can contest it or challenge it. So it's one of those things. It's like getting a speeding ticket. You're guilty before proven innocent. And, maybe you didn't deserve the ticket. Maybe you did nothing wrong. You were just singled out. If you don't defend your chargebacks, then you end up, facing penalties and additional fees. And any time that a chargeback is filed, not only is the retailer charged for the amount of the transaction, but they're also charged a penalty, a fee, sometimes a fine, and there's a reputation score that's also monitored. So chargebacks are bad news. Nobody wants them. So making sure that you kind of know how many chargebacks are coming in and you dispute or challenge the ones that are invalid, because interestingly, just as many customers file chargebacks on legitimate transactions.
Sure.
And they actually use this mechanism for cyber shoplifting.
So just so I'm clear, you guys are in the business of protecting the merchants then?
So we are a neutral party,
Okay.
and we're in the business of helping to automate what is a very manual and cumbersome process that takes like 90 days today.
Yeah.
So our technology brings in all the data from both sides, and then we have a rule engine that helps automatically identify what the right decision is for a given chargeback case, essentially who's right and who's wrong. Now, we're governed by rules that are put in place by the banks and also by the card brands. So Visa and MasterCard, for example.
Very cool. So really curious, like what, we always like to talk about origin stories here. What was the incident or idea that led you to think about, come up with this concept as, a business idea? And then what made you make the decision to dive in and make this happen?
So I got into the chargeback management space completely by accident, out of necessity. I was an online merchant, and my dream was to become the next eBay. I wanted to build this marketplace and use some of the technology background that I had in order to expand and offer more opportunities to small businesses to sell their products on my marketplace. And I was growing, doing business internationally, and just as things, I failed my way to success in that business. Lots of failures, by the way. Totally a difficult business to get into. But just as I was ready to celebrate, then this horrible statistic started increasing called chargebacks. Yeah. And as a retailer, you set up a merchant processing account to process credit cards. And let's face it, the only thing that you care about is, how do I charge a customer and how do I refund them? Nobody tells you about this risk quota that you have to manage, and there could be chargebacks, and it was this whole taboo. And as it turns out, I ended up losing one merchant account after the next because of this problem called chargebacks. Mm. And at the time, this was in probably 2010, there was nothing. Like if I searched online for chargebacks, nothing came up. And I talked to the processors for my account. I talked to banks. I talked to risk managers. And, I was given advice that said, well, Monica, don't talk to people about chargebacks. You don't want chargebacks. Just don't talk. It's a taboo. You shouldn't actually say the word chargebacks. And I'm like, well, how do I fix the problem? Well, you need to refund more of your customers. Customers are calling their banks because you're not refunding. So this is how ignorant I was. Like, I literally created a policy with my call center. I said, anybody that calls, I don't care what they're calling for. No customer is getting off the phone without a refund. And of course, the only thing that did is it reduced the amount of revenue that I made because lo and behold, I had no idea that the majority of chargebacks that I had were actually from customers that never called me. So, and as I started to unfold the source of all of these chargebacks, really because I was facing either I'm going to go bankrupt, because here's what happens. When you get a lot of chargebacks, then the processing bank, so let's say my merchant processor that had underwritten my account for processing credit cards, will keep all of your money that you've made on revenue and hold that in reserve. Yeah. So as a result, I would go from one day thinking, okay, I'm doing great, we've made all of these sales, to the next day, I didn't receive a single deposit on any of the sales that I made. And as a result, I still have to ship all the products. I still have to, fulfill everything. I have to pay for all of those costs, and I have no cash flow. And It's just instant. And then you have these problems start to fluctuate, and, it just becomes a very challenging nightmare to manage and extremely painful. So we were at a point of really just closing shop because of this chargeback problem. Because I had no prediction, I couldn't scale. I didn't know when I was going to get chargebacks. All of a sudden, it would just hit, because a chargeback can be filed on a transaction that's even a year old, depending on what product you sold. I didn't know this. So I could make all of these sales today, and tomorrow find that sales that I had made 90 days ago are now being debited from my account. And I've shipped the product to the customers, I've spent all the money, and now I've lost everything. So push came to shove, and I decided, there's one way out, and I can't quit. I'm way too committed, and I'm a diehard in this. I actually have to figure this out. So I did what any business owner would do, and I just dug in and learned about the problem. And I read probably 2,000 pages of the most horrific, legalese in the payment industry to learn all the nuances about chargebacks so that I could speak the language in payments. And I realized like that was my first problem, is I didn't understand this language in payments. I didn't understand the processes. I didn't know how things worked behind the scenes. And then I thought, you know what? Now that I understand these chargebacks, I need to understand what's happening with my customers. So I surveyed, and I created this survey and surveyed every single customer that had filed a chargeback, because where else to get the data? I couldn't find it anywhere else. And lo and behold, I discovered that there were over 100, I think at the time it was 106 different sources for chargebacks. And actually, I was my own worst enemy. In fact, I could solve the problems. I was getting chargebacks for things like, a billing descriptor, or what was showing on the credit card receipt for my customers was our fax number. It wasn't our phone number. And this is why my customers weren't calling me. They were calling their bank to get a refund because they returned a product to us, or, they wanted a different shipment. And I had no idea. There were all sorts of problems that we could have easily corrected, glitches that we had where, our confirmation email was getting marked as a spam. And so customers weren't receiving this. And we codified every single one of these so that we could use predictive modeling and technology to be able to identify exact risk with as much precision as possible, so that I knew if I was entering into a new market based on the zip code region, based on the shipping delays, based on the demographic of the consumer and all these other variables. Now I've checked the box on all these things. I knew exactly what our chargeback rate is. We also found we were a victim of something called affiliate fraud. I didn't know anything about this. This is fascinating, right? As a business owner, then I thought the smartest way that I can grow this business is if I just pay a commission to others to sell my products. What a great method of advertising. Little did I know there is affiliate marketing online. And with this type of marketing tactic, then business owners have to be very, very vigilant, because you could have one of the sellers for your product could be promising things that you don't even know about. So I discovered so many chargebacks were being filed because my customers had been told that they were getting a $100 Visa gift card if they bought my product. Of course, I paid the seller a commission for this sale, thinking it was a legitimate customer, and then it turns into a chargeback, and it's months later.
So those were the affiliates that were like offering incentives to buy. Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Not delivering on that, and then the chargeback was hitting you.
Correct. I mean, it's a whole plethora of, different loopholes. But the good news is, you can use technology with all the different data points that you have in order to be able to really understand what type of risk, the propensity. And so we developed this platform as a science. Well, as it turns out, last thing that I wanted to do is anything with chargebacks. This was just a necessary evil, like an Achilles heel to my business. Mm-hmm. And as I started to solve the problem, then something amazing happened. I started getting calls from the very banks that previously closed my merchant processing account. And they said, "Hey, what are you doing? Like you're winning back all the revenue from your chargebacks." I said, "Yeah, I figured out that I have rights as a merchant and I can dispute these cases. I have customers that are stealing from me, filing chargebacks to just get free merchandise." And I sold a lot of luxury goods. So this was a problem as well. They said, "Oh my gosh, we've never seen anything like this. Can you talk to one of my merchants?" And I had no problem getting any merchant account. I developed relationships with all the banks that previously had closed my accounts. And so I thought, actually I've now helped so many merchants, and I've been passionate about this, but I still hate chargebacks. I just want to build the next eBay. But I started Chargebacks911, actually as a consulting company to start. I thought I'm just going to have a company so that I can help other merchants, and I have, a legitimate organization. And I wrote all the articles, developed the first programs, and created Chargebacks911, thinking with a name like Chargebacks911, clearly, I never thought that I would do business with a bank. It's totally not conservative at all. But as a merchant, I thought what I want is I want to dial 911 and get rescued from chargeback hell. I wish there was a company like that because I would have called them. So it's one of those crazy, crazy stories. Within a matter of weeks of, putting this public, then I was contacted by the New York Times, then the Wall Street Journal, and very, quickly thereafter, just a flood of merchants. And I thought, I think this is destiny. And now I sold all the interest that I had in the merchant company and decided I'm going to build a chargeback platform, and we are going to solve this problem for the industry.
That is super, super interesting story. A lot to unpack, and I want to dive into some of those points. I'll just share a personal story. I had e-commerce businesses going back about 15 years, so I am familiar with the process. And it's interesting because you say it's kind of taboo, and from what I saw, no one did really talk about that. It's kind of a quiet subject matter. And so to know that you're out there solving that is awesome and really fantastic. I have learned from just a personal consumer perspective that I will mention that word if I'm calling in and disputing something. When I do that, usually they take care of you. So that's something, and I've shared that with my wife, who's also named Monica, and she actually once said to me, you know what, I think we saw something show up on our bill and, we did not recognize it or whatever the case was, didn't receive the product. And she said, I'm just going to contact the bank and have them charge that back. I said, wait, you can't just do that. You got to contact the merchant first and go through the process. But it was kind of funny. But super interesting that this is an area that, as you mentioned, it touches everybody that has, a merchant account and needs to sell online. And it is pretty quiet. So I would like to hear about how you went from, and how long were you doing the consulting? I'm guessing you were working with,
None. I did not do consulting.
Okay.
All I did is I set up the website with an idea that I was spending so much time on the phone helping other merchants that were referred to me. And some of these were big box brands, like they weren't, no name merchants. And so I literally did no consulting whatsoever. I just had this idea, and, it was one of those things like when you go through so much pain and firsthand experience, you want to just share that with the world, because I was so angry and enraged about, like, why didn't I know that this is a problem? Why wasn't there resources available to solve this? And so I just had so much knowledge on this subject, and I just put everything online, and with the idea that I would start charging consulting. And now I have this presence, and it was like there was a lot of interest. And then the next thing I realized, I think that we can actually take this technology platform and scale it. And it's funny, if I look back then, the number one obstacle that I confronted in selling the solution is literally convincing merchants that they could do something about it.
Interesting.
Like today, everyone knows about it. I think there's 30 different companies in the chargeback space. But then that was my number one challenge, because I would talk to a merchant. They'd say, you know what? No, you can't. There's no solution for chargebacks. There's no prediction for chargebacks. And I would have to say, I promise there is. And our very first business model was I just charged them a percentage of the money that I was able to recover or prevent. And it was a no risk proposition. And I literally did no marketing to merchants. It was just referrals from clients that I had that talked to other clients, and we grew organically.
Very cool. So how did you go about kind of laying the foundation for what the software would look like, the platform, and build that? Do you have a technical background, or did you have to bring in a CTO or technical founder? Kind of what was that process like?
Yeah, so I built the program. I constructed the program to start myself and tied together a bunch of databases. It was homegrown with some HTML. And so that was and we used that for probably a couple years.
Hmm.
And then I hired some developers. Obviously, I had a team that managed websites, but when you build software, it's a different animal, right? And the user is very different. So it's different if you're dealing with businesses versus B2C. But yes, to answer your question, I had a background in technology. I previously was involved in building VoIP software in the early 2000s. And one thing, I think when you get into technology, you just have that bug, and you think outside of the box about what problem you have to solve, and it's really about trying to reorganize systems and figure out ways to repurpose technology solutions. So interestingly, the Chargeback platform, the original vision was actually based on the ACD, or the automated call distribution software that I had in the past, because I thought what is needed for chargebacks is intelligent routing.
Mm.
And it's a similar application with a different use case.
Interesting. And so by similar routing, you mean depending on what stage the process things are, or kind of what?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like you're really just handling random case data, and you have to qualify all of those different attributes and make a decision. Only, in the VoIP world, then you're making decisions in real time. With chargebacks, it's more of a latent process.
Yeah.
And the task is you need to gather a lot more data, but it's still process driven, and you can use machine learning, and there's a lot of cool tech that can be deployed to help create better decisions, faster outcomes. And then with chargeback data, so if you think about it, I used to use an analogy. It sounds awful, but chargebacks are like garbage, right? I mean, it's like you find out everything about the company, just like you would if you went through someone's trash. How their QA department is, how their shipping is, because you're going to get chargebacks on anything that you do wrong. So it's really that it has tremendous BI and intelligence to a merchant, providing that they know how to digest that information and utilize it. But also, just like garbage, there's a certain amount that can be recycled and you can get money from. So you need to know the value that each of those, that each of those data points bring, and use that to help improve your business processes, and then defend cases where it was filed against a transaction that was totally valid.
Super interesting. So what does the team look like today?
So today we have just under 400 employees worldwide. We have our headquarters for North America is in Tampa. That's where we started. And then we have our international headquarters in London. We have a location in Singapore and 2 locations in India.
Wow, very impressive. And how, this is a question that I love asking and hearing, but as the founder, how has your role shifted and changed from, I'm imagining early on, it was a team of 1, right?
Right.
To this like really large, nice sized, 400 international presence. What is that? What was the evolutionary steps of kind of your involvement, and what do you spend most of your time doing today?
Sure. So I think just like any business owner, right? Scaling is your number one challenge. And once you get to a certain point, to start, of course, I did every job. I created every process, and I wore every hat, just like any founder-led business. Like, this is the way that you start. Fortunately, I was able to recruit amazing individuals. Just amazing people, that many of them are still with us today. And this has been a decade now. As we've grown, I think it has just become divide and conquer. And, funny enough, so I've always hired very competent assistants, executive assistants that were really much more than an executive assistant, kind of like my right hand on all these different areas. And so far, every single one of them has become a department manager because they have so much education and they learn so much. And I think as you grow, then you just end up dividing and conquering. And, when you're smaller, then you don't look for, I wouldn't necessarily look for people that had amazing leadership ability. I wanted people that had great heart and they could catch on quickly and they were 100% committed and this job was their life. Our passions aligned. That was the most important. And then as you grow and get larger and larger, where now, we're doing business in, different regions and more international, then you have to, I think, then you need to start to look at bringing in more external talent. It's more difficult to just promote from within because you need to, broaden your horizons and you want that external feedback. You want some of the traditional corporate influence. It's great to have a startup mentality and you don't want to lose that culture. I used to have my hands in every single department, but as we've grown, I still have a lot of interest and a lot of input in product development. But my role has changed more to, handling our largest strategic relationships, working more on the strategy side of things. I don't handle as many escalations because I have, more bench to handle that. And it's been a very exciting, very super exciting journey. But, making sure, and I would also say, I think as an owner, as a founder, and even as a leader, my number one job is actually making sure that as an organization, first, we're able to maintain our culture. We're able to, maintain a very solid strategy, but also making sure that every person, we have them matched. We have their skill set matched with a role where they can contribute the most with the least amount of effort. And for me, I've learned, establishing a culture that creates owner mentality has been substantial for us. I can only take the organization so far. The organization has to drive itself. And in many ways, it's the team that actually motivates me to get to that next level. And oftentimes I'm chasing behind trying to keep up because I have such a passionate team. But I think, you have to keep things in perspective. As much of a control freak as probably every single entrepreneur is, I have the same challenges. I want to get involved in so many different facets, but you need to let people grow on their own and they will surprise you. I've been incredibly surprised by the ingenuity and brilliance of, people that have grown in this organization and even those that we've recruited from external.
What is it like? I want to dive into some of this stuff as far as growth and team expansion and all that, but what is it like as you grow and identifying those people that are a right fit to kind of own and lead different aspects of the business, and you being the founder who was involved early on and kind of touching every aspect and kind of owning every aspect? How did you get to the point where you were able to hand off and let people be, run somewhat autonomously and make that part of the business, their own to really own that piece and lead it?
So great question.
I think that's a big challenge for a lot of founders is letting go and allowing others to, take the reins in certain aspects where they are the strong fit.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. So I think, traditional and I am not a fan of traditional. I'm probably a nonconformist. But if I always looked at, I am not a huge fan of hierarchy either. So if I went through some challenges, early on in thinking, okay, well, actually, I need to change the structure of our organization. I want to be more Wall Street. I want to be more like a bank. But you know what? I don't want to be more like a bank. I'm actually a technology company, and we are nothing like a bank. We are agile. We are nimble. I have people that are passionate. I have people that argue, but they have owner mentality, and this job is more than just a paycheck. That's actually what makes us better. And so, getting the confidence to realize your culture. I think Peter Drucker had said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So, I mean, it is super important, and it's very easy to fall into a trap of thinking, oh, the grass is greener, and I need to, agree with this, very rigid hierarchy structure. So what we have done in our organization, we have a holarchy type of system. So imagine it's like a Venn diagram, and we encourage more self-management. So it's role-based management as opposed to traditional hierarchies. We're not huge on titles. We're huge on roles. And what that allows an individual to do is to really be able to dig in and add value where they're most passionate, which, let's face it, if someone's doing something that they love and they enjoy, you're going to get more bang for your buck. They're going to be happier. Everybody's going to be happier, and they're actually going to do a better job. And everybody wins as a result. Now, with holarchy type of system, with this type of Venn diagram where you have, concentric circles and they interact with different departments, then I have found a much more successful management structure because it's peer-based management as well. Where there's an intersection, then it's not just one person that is managing, these 20 people. They have a direct report. It's actually that person is interacting with others, and there's a lot more KPIs, there's unified statistics, there's a lot more collaboration. And it's, the whole organization kind of moving as a unified team, as opposed to, extremely siloed components that aren't looking out for each other. They're just working as an independent company. And these are some of the symptoms that I've seen, as we've toyed with different types of structures. For us, what has been most effective is to maintain that culture and that type of structure where they're interlaced. And so I don't need someone to be an expert leader to be an amazing manager, because we're able to leverage expertise from many different team members. And really, we strive for improving qualitative statistics. And at the end of the day, what I've discovered is that happy employees are employees who are performing. If you can show an employee how to produce and they can realize that they're adding value, you haven't made. That is the name of the game. And if everybody is producing and everybody is paying attention to the same type of statistics, then you have a very agile, fun organization to work for and work in. And that's really our goal.
So how would you describe the culture at Chargebacks911? And as a follow-up to that, it sounds very unique, and I love, what you're describing here. Was that intentional, or was it trial and error to get to more of the flat-ish org chart and just some of these things that you're doing differently?
I think it was, it definitely wasn't intentional. It was just, our motto is challenge the status quo. So I think, I'm a huge fan of innovation. I'm a fan of failing fast, embrace change when you need it, and you've never done your best. So always be willing to challenge. I'm willing to test anything. So I'm not a believer in anything that is totally static. I think, if you subscribe to that belief, you're already moving backwards, because the world is moving way too fast. And it's moving with behavioral trends. It's moving with, consumers are evolving, employees are evolving. The whole world is evolving, and we have to embrace those pivots. Yeah. So if I look at, how the organization started, then it wasn't intentional. It was just kind of organic, because let's face it, it was very, very flat. And I realized, okay, and we scaled pretty rapidly.
Mm.
So in order to scale rapidly, that means I need people that are going to be worker bees that just do the job, but then I want to make sure that they're also passionate about it. And as they attain more business logic and they become experts in their arena, they're going to naturally move up in the organization. They may not have been the best managers, which is sometimes a challenge. It's always a challenge in small businesses because you never go out. You don't have the money to go recruit the most amazing external talent. You're scrappy when you start, and it's like the garage shop crew, and then this crew, they're all diamonds in the rough, and they become the leaders of tomorrow. But it takes time, it takes perseverance, it takes a lot of training because you're all working up through the ranks and working in the trenches together, and that builds character. And then as you grow and as you scale, now you can start to establish more finesse. You're going to hire people that already have that training. They don't have to go up through the ranks, and you're in a totally different space. So I think by just organically, we scaled very rapidly, and as a result, we needed people that weren't going to belabor us with red tape and policies, which is what I would have gotten if I would have said, let me recruit the external talent that I have today. They would have quit in 2 seconds with our organization when we started because we were very, very different. It was like, every single day was survival. And this is how most businesses start out. And it's a very different, you're developing your processes. You're, creating everything on the fly, figuring out what's needed because you don't actually have every single thing mapped out. You haven't scaled to the point. You have this vision, and your goal is to make that vision a reality. And what you need for that team is a different need than what you need, for the team as you grow. And what I've recognized is that those needs for the foundation of our success, that is a foundation that makes us better. And that's a culture that I have found tremendous value in maintaining, even though, we're playing a much different ballgame with nearly 400 employees worldwide and doing business, virtually in every country. It's more challenging to maintain that startup type mentality culture, but it's much more advantageous.
That's cool. Super interesting, just the growth that you guys have had. How do you find, just to dive in a little bit to, some of the points you brought up, I think you mentioned, those diamonds in the rough, those kind of early team members. And I think you said like they were even like executive assistants as their starting point. How do you find those people? Are there any clues when you're looking for talent that people have to really fit?
Sure. So I have never been a believer that somebody needs to fit in a certain box in order to do a good job, and mainly because of my own experience. So, I studied art and architecture for 1 semester. I did never finish college. I have never thought, I got ahead because I was the smartest person in the room. But I've always known I was the hardest worker in that room, and I'm the hardest worker compared to anybody. And I will not give up when anyone else will. And that's how I've gotten ahead. Mm-hmm. So that perseverance and tenacity has served me very well. And these are the qualities that I look for in individuals. So when I would interview someone, then I would look for someone, it didn't matter to me if they had a degree, but what have they tackled in their life? What if they have been job hoppers? That was totally off. I'm not going to be interested because I want someone who has shown a level of commitment. And if you stay with one company for a period of time, there's no such thing as hearts and flowers for every company constantly. There's always ups and downs. So I knew, this is something that I'm looking for, is someone that has stamina, and someone that's been progressive, and also attitude. I was looking for a can-do, positive, gung-ho attitude where, they have confidence in their ability to learn, to catch on, and to work hard. That's all that I needed. If I have that confidence, then I can work with the rest, and providing, they can catch on quickly and they're not going to give up. I am much more apt to, find a great fit for the organization with a person that's not going to second guess themselves in taking the wrong step. It's so easy to correct a wrong step. It's almost impossible to try to convince someone to where they need to go to move forward. And for me, and every organization is different, but for me, I would look for people. I even would, if I was looking at degrees, then I would think, okay, or even prior jobs, I would think, I'm looking for waitresses that actually want to do more and that have worked at the busiest restaurants, because they can handle stress, they can handle change, and they can multitask. You know what? I'm going to give them an opportunity to change their entire life. If they can adapt to technology, they'll be amazing. I would look for people who had studied criminal justice, because I knew these people have an interest in identifying who's right and wrong, and they're going to be detail oriented, and they're going to care about digging into things. And I really want that passion. I would look for people that, maybe they were studying psychology, or they're studying something totally different, but it told me this is a person that is looking kind of outside the box. Teachers, another great recruit for us, because these are people that, they want to control things. They're going to lead something. They have that level of confidence. Otherwise, you wouldn't want to be a teacher. Many of our clients may have acted like children at some point. So that's always good when you're starting out, to have those skills. But I think, it's really just, and sometimes, you just need to make bets on people, and sometimes it doesn't work. Yeah. But oftentimes it does. And if you find, people that are very interested, the other thing that I did is, I never started anybody at a high salary. I wanted to make sure that they were going to invest, because it was a huge risk for me as well. And I would say, this is a new education that you're getting, and I want to know that you are committed. And so I would make sure that there was a very strict time frame and very, very strict performance metrics. So I knew they're 100% in. This is not just, a temporary job to get to the next item.
It's great. Really good stuff. Just real quickly, you mentioned at a certain point, especially scaling a business, it's where you guys have grown, knowing you need to look for external talent. So how did you know, what are the signs there that it's time to bring someone with that outside perspective in?
Sure. Well, I think as you grow, and first of all, you get to where you have much more financial security, so you can look at recruiting talent and people that are already trained. You don't have to work them. You don't have to hire at a lower level and then know that you can bring them up to speed after a couple of years investing and making sure they have that skill set. So as you scale, then, you think, okay, well, maybe I can just hire that skill set now and I don't have to build it internally. So those are things that we look for. We're growing quickly, and we need somebody who has been a technical project manager. Well, we have the ability to train a person who's interested in becoming a technical project manager, but it's going to take us a while to get them trained. Whereas now I want to hire someone who's already a technical project manager. They spent the last few years working for an organization that was a startup, and that organization already trained them. And now I want to get further ahead by getting that expertise. Also processes. I only know so much. Each department head that I have only knows so much. So in order for you to continue to stay relevant and up to date, then it makes sense to take a look at bringing external talent that is going to have a totally different viewpoint. And I would expect this viewpoint means they're going to challenge everything that we're doing. Some things they're going to win, other things they're going to lose. But having a mentality that is a fresh perspective, an external perspective, otherwise you have everybody on the same page and they're saying, hey, everything that we're doing is great because it's better than what it was last month. Well, but is it really? Because if I ask someone else from a different industry, a different organization, maybe they're going to come and say, what you guys are doing could be 10 times better. It doesn't matter that you're improving on your own. You are pathetic in this area, and this is how you can change. So those are tremendous assets, I think, that can be uncovered by looking for a great diverse mix, internal and external.
Yeah, some really valuable stuff there. I think especially right now with the whole workforce and it being challenging finding people and then finding those people who are fit. So this has been really good. You mentioned, having this vision and then having to figure out, what do I need to turn that into a reality? I would also add to that, how do you share that vision? Because that's something that's probably in your head, especially early on. How do you articulate that out to your team members? Mostly internal, but any stakeholders, but team members in particular. How did you do that early on to get people to buy into your vision and what they were a part of? And then to today, where you have 400 people, how do you continue to do that so that now this large group of people that probably aren't, engaged with you on a daily basis, how do they get to see that as well?
Yeah. So when we first started, I think it was a lot easier to convey the vision. Yeah. And, I am a huge believer of keeping things simple. So I may have a vision of 20 steps ahead and I have a tendency to focus on the future, but I know in order to lead a team, they can handle 5 steps. We don't need to you don't want to get too out there because people lose perspective, and you actually need your team to focus on the present and just a little bit of the future. As an entrepreneur, you're probably focused more on the future and a little bit of the present. And that's how you can maintain momentum. So that's really important. But as we've grown and as we've scaled, then I think that mentality has changed a little bit as well. Now our organization by design is a bit more compartmentalized because in many ways they're different business units. And this is what you find naturally with any organization. And each of those business units operates sort of independent. So they have their own vision, and that vision is not the same as, everything goes toward the same, and they have, an idea of where everything is going, and everybody's on the same page with, how their production values or contribution is adding value to the organization. But I think that that as an entrepreneur, you also need to realize there's some risk when you get of a certain scale of outlining with too much detail what the exact strategy is, because let's face it, as you grow, you collect competitors, and really, your vision and your strategy also becomes a competitive advantage. And so it becomes actually super important that you maintain, certain things that we have in product development, that actually that is going to be bifurcated from the rest of the organization. And some that are over here, they have a different, everybody can see where things are going and overall corporate goals. But there's a lot more, I guess, strategic separation. I think Steve Jobs did a great job of this. You always hear about, he kept everybody in the dark with what was going on in product and what is going on over here. You know what? You have to do that. You have to do that because you're as you grow, you have more and more competitors. And it's now not as much about what is your product. It's actually about what's your product strategy? What are you doing next? What's your vision? What are you building? And so a lot of those things become more sensitive, and it's the intel as well that you have to protect.
Fantastic. Really good stuff. Before I ask my last question to wrap up the conversation, Monica, is it just chargebacks911.com?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Awesome. And I encourage everyone to go check it out. Really cool hearing the story about, how you've grown. And then any place that for people that want to follow you, connect with you, is it LinkedIn? Or are there anywhere else that you're active?
Yeah, you can look me up on LinkedIn. So Monica Eaton-Cardone, and you can also visit my own website, which is monicaec.com.
Cool. Very cool. Well, with that, so we like to wrap up by asking the question, if you were able to go back in time before you even started this, maybe when this was just a thought in your head, as you were going through the challenges of chargebacks, what would you, if you were able to go back, sit down and have a cup of coffee with your former self and offer some advice, what would that be?
So my advice would be to be more brave. So I think starting out in any business, you always think you're the only one that's going through this. Maybe you should, I've been very risk adverse, and looking at the opportunity, sometimes it has taken me a couple of years to realize, hey, this idea that I had, you know what, actually, I could have done it 2 years ago, but I waited because I just didn't have that confidence. And so I think, being willing to put yourself out there a little bit more, at least for me, we've had incredible success and it's been super, super exciting. But if I were giving myself advice, there are certain things that I didn't do, or I didn't go after, that I could have very easily. And because I was doubting, maybe I don't know this enough. So I think, and maybe listening to too many people, like another thing, I hired different consultants to tell me how to run the business. And because I had other, people saying, well, you know what, you should have this org chart and it should look like this. That's another thing. Having confidence that, hey, my stats are great. The company is growing. You know what I'm doing is working and it's right. I actually don't need anyone else to tell me to change it. And oftentimes, it's these consultants that actually, they're telling you how to do things. They've never ran a business. They've never owned a business. They're actually not successful themselves. But it's those critiques that end up affecting you and creating doubt. And some of those doubts, actually, I would have given myself advice to say, if it's working, and if you can see that it's working, and if you know that this is going to work, actually don't listen to anyone else.
I love it. I think that's a great point. Sometimes we got to kind of listen to ourselves and rise above some of that noise and
yes, don't try to please everybody. Yeah, you do not need to please everyone.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, Monica, thank you. Great conversation and insights here today. So I appreciate your time. I encourage everybody to go check out the website, chargeback911.com, and connect with Monica or reach out if you're interested in that. To everybody who's tuned in, thank you guys for joining. We'll be back again next week with another guest. But again, thank you so much today, Monica, for all the great insight and sharing what you did.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, take care, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks again, Monica. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you. Okay, cheers.